Welcome back to Screenfish Radio, and happy holidays, Merry Christmas. I never expected for a holiday spectacular for this to be the film we're covering, but it is our holiday spectacular this year. And we're talking about Godzilla Minus One, and I am really excited to chat about this one, and I am so thrilled to have back a couple of good friends to the show, Kirk Haviland and Ben Dower. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Anytime. I'm so glad you're here. Godzilla Minus One is set in 1945 near the end of World War II when a kamikaze pilot, Koichi Shikishima, lands on a Japanese base in Odo Island. Lead mechanic Tachibana deduces that Shikishima has fled from his duty by feigning technical issues. But that night, Godzilla, a dinosaur-like creature, attacks, and Shikishima cannot bring himself to shoot the monster from his plane and is knocked unconscious. From there, the nation of Japan works tirelessly to prevent the beast from destroying millions of lives, and Shikishima must race to action to be part of the cause. As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. And gentlemen, I would love to hear from you what you thought of Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah, I finally got a chance to catch up with it, and I was in awe for all 2 hours and 5 minutes of its runtime. It's perfectly paced. It's just magnetic performances, and it's just so well conceived. I mean, it really is. I mean, there's a massive and what I think well-deserved push to get this out there for award season and get people nominating it for stuff. So it was just shortlisted for visual effects, I think, for the Oscars this week. So as we're talking about this, so yeah, it's fantastic, and it's a lot more than your typical kaiju film.
Yeah, I really loved it. I've been watching Godzilla movies since I was little, and in many ways, this is the Godzilla movie I wanted to see. It's an update of the original premise with modern technology. And yeah, it was just great. It was fantastic on every level.
It is insane to me that a film like this, and I'm not as well versed in the kaiju world as both of you are. We know this, but it is insane to me how well executed this film is, and what a great film it is. It's not a great Godzilla film. I mean, it is, but it's not a great kaiju film. It's a great film. Like,
Yep.
this is one I can feel like I can recommend to any action fan. And, well, I don't really like Godzilla, and it doesn't matter.
Well, the thing is with this film as well is it takes a cultural touchstone, setting it right after the war, and you're dealing with I don't know if failed is the right word, but a failed kamikaze pilot who didn't honor his duty, which was obviously it's a touchstone in Japanese history, because it was such a polarizing subject when people came back from the war after they lost, and other people were like, well, why didn't you die for the cause? I mean, it's a very polarizing subject, and it took many years for this to be something that a lot of citizens were able to move past. And you take that very grounded, very real story, and you put it into a world as fantastical as a Godzilla film, but it just kind of grounds everything. And I think the other thing about which I really enjoyed and I really loved is because you're taking it back to that time frame. The film isn't in black and white, but it very well could be.
It's being re-released in black and white.
It is going to be released. Yes,
Yeah.
I heard that in Japan in like 3 weeks. I think it is
Yeah.
that they're releasing it in an all black and white version. But the film already feels like it could be in black and white. You know what I mean? Because it's all the muted tones, and they kind of, it's the way that they frame it and the way that they've shot it. It has that feel already. So I think I imagine it's going to be glorious if they put it when they do make a black and white version. But that with the subject matter, it takes it so much back, like, and the way that it connects to the original Godzilla is so effortlessly too. I mean, I love the fact that they actually just use the original fanfare. It's not an updated version of the original fanfare. It's not one of these other new versions that, and the way that they changed it in the 70s and the 80s and into the 2000s Godzilla films, that the theme has evolved, but the original film and that specific fanfare showing up at specific times in this film, just it all just kind of was a perfectly blended. Plus we can get into it a little bit, but I think this is one of the most effective creature designs for Godzilla, I think, in any Godzilla film. It's just a brilliant design.
Yep. Just a second.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have a question? Or
Oh, I thought you were going to respond.
What am I supposed to say?
Hold on, and then you coughed. And
okay.
You don't have to.
Yes. Okay, yeah. No, I can. Yeah, no, I agree with the creature design. The Heisei Godzilla series is my favorite, and this looks like a very nice update of that specific design.
Yep.
And so it was nice to see, you know, for me anyway, being sort of growing up in the 90s, that's a return home in a way. Yeah, because we're not the well, I'm not the original generation of Godzilla fans. I'm the one who's the Heisei era was my Godzilla era.
Yeah.
So it is in a way a touch to the nostalgia that I grew up with, but also going back to the roots of the original film.
I mean, it took kind of it did take kind of the body shape, it was more of the body shape, like the overall shape of, say, closer to the original films from like the original 54 to the stuff in the 60s. But the way that the scales were done and the way that he engages to actually let out his blast is very much taken from the Heisei era, and it's just and I love the fact that you actually have the shots where he actually engages the spikes, so it kind of gives it's kind of almost like a ticking time bomb. So once you see
you see them
popping
going
up, it's like this internal countdown that you already, you know what I mean? It really effective at building up the tension.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because in the original film they just kind of light up and then the fire goes out, and over the years they've developed it into this thing that could be used for, you know, as a narrative device or whatever. Like now when we see a Godzilla movie, like as soon as you see them light up, we the audience know what's coming, but the characters don't always know.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of, I guess you call that dramatic irony, right? Like where
the
audience knows.
I do believe it was, and you can correct me here if I'm wrong, but I do believe it was the 2014 American Godzilla film, which, you know, being a purist as yourself, you may have issues with. I actually remember seeing that in the theater for the first time and literally sitting in my seat doing this because I was so excited, because the way that they played it, like it wasn't just Godzilla everywhere, much like this film. Zero minus one is he's not everywhere. They do time where he shows up, which I think is the key to it. But that 2014 film, I believe, is where they introduced the fact that he would have to ramp up, and you would hear that sound.
Where it would be for any length of time. There are a couple of was like GMK, he charges up, but it's only a couple of seconds. Like it's not a. But
I think the fact that it was this, you're introducing almost this countdown aspect to it where he has to ramp up was one thing I think that came out of the American films that I actually enjoyed.
Yeah.
But for anything for all of them introducing it, this is the most effective use I've seen of it.
Yeah.
Period. So I mean,
can I say that I feel like this is a match made in heaven here. I'm really enjoying I knew you liked Godzilla. I had no idea, Kirk. But this is, I'm just sitting back and watching because you guys know your
my
stuff.
Godzilla shelf is over there.
Really?
We're throwing acronyms around now. GMK.
I should also just, I mean, I know we're talking about -1, and deservedly so, but I mean, obviously right now, at the same time, you've got the Monarch TV series on Apple TV, which is completely different as well. And it's completely reimagining the American films and giving it this whole underlying subcurrent of a new story, which is very intriguing as well. So
see, I haven't seen the Monarch ones.
And neither have I. I don't have Apple
I haven't
TV.
seen the Monarch show. I've seen all the films about it, but I haven't seen the new series. And I've actually heard the series is pretty good.
I have actually seen all of the series now. Can't really talk about all of it because some of it is embargoed because it hasn't screened yet, but I have actually been able to watch the entire series. I will say that it does start out really strong. And then it kind of loses its way a little bit in all of the different levels of suspense and intrigue that they're trying to add in. So it kind of gets a little muddled towards episode 6, 7-ish, 8, but it does end well. And it ends in a different way that sets up different things going into the film. So I mean, it actually starts the film. This isn't a spoiler, but it's actually set in 2015, the year after the American attack that happens in the 2014 film. But then by the end, it kind of ties into some of the other stuff that's going on, but it also leaves leeway for them to catch up. I actually enjoyed the prospect of Russell, you have Wyatt Russell playing his father at a younger age, and Kurt Russell playing the older character. And they have this one shot in the series where they literally zoom in on Kurt Russell's face and it slowly morphs into Wyatt's. And it's like, wow, they really do have the same bone structure in their face. It's insane how the morph works. It's crazy. Anyways. Well, I just figured I'd mention that because
this is good. No, this is good. Actually, this is a good launch pad, I think, in some because here's the thing that Ben and I talk about this all the time. Can America make a Godzilla movie? Because we've seen the new films, and there are some that I actually kind of enjoy, but this is the first Godzilla film -1, and I mean, obviously, I'm not as well versed as you both in the Japanese years. I know this is the 60th anniversary, but this is the first one that I saw the characters and I was in. Like, I cared about the people. And
well, I mean, I don't want to interject and step on your foot here, but for a lot of people entering Godzilla, and I'm sure Ben can agree with me on this, for a lot of people trying to enter the Godzilla world, they usually end up starting at the wrong place.
Yes.
If you're gonna start with Godzilla, I mean, for me, you either start at the very, very beginning and set the tone right away, or you start somewhere in the 90s where they really started reinventing and started taking the lore seriously. You can't start with the 70s and 80s films. And a lot of people start with the 70s and 80s films because what happens is, starting in the mid 70s through to the mid to late 80s, they just became sillier and sillier and sillier because the budgets were becoming less, you know what I mean? And they were pumping them out quicker and quicker and quicker. I mean, some of them are really good, but a lot of them are just, Manila. That's all I'm going to say.
Manila.
Well, in the
you don't know who Manila is, do you?
I haven't exposed him to that. I have not exposed him to that.
That is the son of Godzilla, and he goes around chasing bubbles. And that's all I'm going to say. We don't need to. Manila was one step too far.
But see, so when we think of Godzilla, and I say as a person who doesn't know a lot about Godzilla, when we think about Godzilla, a lot of times we think about the goofy ones.
Yeah, that's 70s.
That's not the soul of Godzilla. I understand that. And I know, and Ben and I have talked enough that for me to understand the real meaning of it. But it begs. I want to go back to the Americans here, because time after time they try, and they'll make money. Like Godzilla versus Kong made money, and I just thought it was an atrocious film. Like I didn't care about, like I thought the last few minutes was fun.
Yeah,
but Can they make a good one?
I mean, I personally really enjoyed the 2014 film. I thought it was well done. It's of the newer ones, it's for me, it's still the high watermark of the newer American ones.
Yeah, I hate that movie.
Okay, fair
Which
enough.
is funny, right? Like,
I know a lot
I
of
know,
people don't like it,
yeah,
but I mean, but that's the thing. You have I enjoyed a good chunk of that, especially the way that they imagined the attack and having that whole set piece where there were actually the people on the train, where it wasn't just little, puppets, and they actually had a full interaction on it. That was really cool for me. But anyways, then you get into the Skull Island, which is it's Skull Island was fine. It had its moments, but it was kind of all over the
It's pretty
place.
good. I didn't mind it. It didn't it was...
Exactly. And then then you had what,
King of Monsters, which
King
I
of
did not
Monsters,
like.
which was their attempt to make like a mid-80s Godzilla movie, and but they're also trying to make it as a serious film. There's parts of that film that could have been ripped out of, like, Destroy All Monsters.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But there's also parts where you're like, what is all this exposition and bullshit?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the jokes, the needless jokes, every second line.
It's I own it. Of course I own it.
I own it. Yeah.
You know, I own, well, not every Godzilla film, but a good chunk of them. I'm still waiting for Criterion to release the second box set, because
I'm hoping they do that. I'm really hoping they do that.
but yeah, no, and then I mean, a lot of people had issues with Godzilla versus Kong. Again, the final 20-30 minutes, the whole sequence where Mecha shows up and everything, really, really well done, but there are some issues going. So I mean, it's their whole fascination with having to set up this whole interconnected storyline has both helped and hindered them.
Yeah. And you could say that for the 90s as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But the I will say that the new TV series does a better job of connecting those dots than the movies leading into each other, at least so far. It itself, like I said, still gets muddled down in some stuff, but it's well done, and I really appreciated the fact that they didn't shy away from showing Godzilla in the new TV series. Like, they spent money. They spent some bank on it. So, but yeah, not to get so far away from our original topic, but it's interesting that the Americans still haven't quite. But to be fair, a lot of the more recent Godzilla films coming out of Japan have been kind of hit and miss as well.
The anime ones, I watched the first one, fell asleep, and didn't watch the rest.
The whole anime TV series was,
and the TV series was like, I watched till Godzilla showed up. By then, I was like, I don't really care anymore.
I was just a big pass on that. And then and Shin Godzilla is decent, but it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like Shin Godzilla a lot.
Yeah, and get me wrong, it's a good movie, but it's not like, I mean, -1 has reset. I don't think it's an understatement to say that -1 has reset the bar.
I think
so
reset
the expectations. Like, it's a top 3, top 5 Godzilla film of all time. Like, it's that good.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an understatement to say that it's just
Shin Godzilla is very inaccessible to the general audience, I think.
Yep.
It's a very good film, and it tackles, like, almost every scene tackles some issue external to the film. You know, like government bureaucracy, the bombing unit that goes to bomb Godzilla halfway through the film from America is a descendant unit from the ones that bombed Japan in the war. Like, there's little things that if you know your history, you'll pull out.
Yeah.
But most people aren't going to do that research. They're going to get bogged down in the government meetings.
Yeah. The whole Shin series has been interesting to watch, because Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, which just came out last year.
Yeah,
or this
I haven't
year.
seen that one yet.
This year.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I have seen Shin Kamen Rider. It's it's got its moments, but it's also a
Okay.
little silly too. If you know anything about the whole Kamen Rider series, you'll get more out of it than you will.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about it. I know more Ultraman
I'm
and more
with you.
Godzilla.
I'm with you. I didn't know a
Yeah.
lot about it, but I knew enough about it. And all you really need to know about Kamen Rider is that if Power Rangers doesn't exist without Kamen Rider being first.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, but yeah, that was the whole that whole universe is actually a little different as well. But yeah, a -1 is just it's weird how it works as
Yeah.
well as it does, because it's
Yeah.
very, because of you have a cultural touchstones, and they're talking about something very deeply Japanese and cultural when you're talking about the whole reaction after the war and stuff like that. But it's so done in such a way that it can translate so universally, so perfectly.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know where they go from here. Like, I have no idea where Toho goes from here.
I do not want Godzilla -2. I said that to Ben as soon as we left the theater. I said, Godzilla -2. I don't want that. I don't want them to, because this is so good.
I don't know what they're gonna do.
I think they have in my opinion, they have one option, which is to go completely the opposite way. And if it was me, I just go the complete opposite direction and set it in the 80s and make it as ridiculously and ludicrously insane as possible. Why not?
I don't know if that would work. I want to see Mothra redone in a similar style.
That's fair. I mean, Mothra
That's what I want to see.
Mothra is very much a misunderstood and in some ways not fully realized character. I mean, there's so much untapped potential in Mothra.
Yes. Yeah. And people go, what do you mean? It's a giant moth. What is it? There's a lot there.
There's a lot of untapped
Mothra.
The whole lore with
the
Mothra
lore
and the twins and everything. There's a lot of untapped potential there.
Oh yeah.
I think there's a lot that you could do with Rodan. I mean, so I mean, they have so yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but yeah, I think the only obvious for me reaction to this is just to go completely the opposite direction and do something that is so not Godzilla -1.
In fairness, I think Legendary is going to do that for us next year.
That's fair.
We'll see how that goes.
What is it? What are they calling it now?
Godzilla X Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be fair, that's a very Japanese way of titling the film right now.
It is,
especially in anime. Everything is something X something.
Yeah.
Like Spy Family, which is like one of the biggest animes out there, is not Spy Family, it's Spy X Family. So yeah, having the X in the middle of it is right now very on brand for Japan. So
yeah, and that goes back to, at least in the Godzilla series, it goes back to Godzilla versus Megaguirus.
Yep,
they had an X in the title. That was 2000. That was 2000.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's funny how Godzilla 2000 wasn't actually released in 2000.
1999. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is about this film, going back to -1. For me, what made it work is how they use Godzilla.
Yep.
And I don't just mean how they use him in the film per se. I mean, Godzilla feels like he means something again. And I think that, one of the things we've seen in the films that I have liked from the series, the ones I've really liked, are the ones that mean something more than the beast. And with him here, he's just such a force of nature. And the characters are actually well written. Like, I care about their journey. Shikishima's journey is relatable, even if it isn't. You know what I mean? It is a very specific story for a very specific cultural moment and cultural story. The kamikaze pilot, 1945, into World War II. But the way that he's written, is so well done. And I think that's the thing, that I feel like is missing from the American films, is that, you know, they want to get too fast to the monsters fighting each other,
Yeah.
that you don't care why. And this particular film, the to see him grow and wrestle with his demons, if you will, that hits different. That hits different. That they made it a story about people,
Yeah.
as opposed to about monsters. And the monsters are, you know, monsters matter because the people matter.
I think you just kind of skirted around and almost got to the point of why this works so much better than, say, the American versions, is that in the American versions of the film, as much as we do have some love for them, or you don't, a lot of the character development, a lot of the characters that are on screen are plot driven and character driven around Godzilla. Whereas in -1, Godzilla is just the force of nature that's in the film, and the character is dealing with his own stuff. He's not, it's not, Shikishima's character is not just in existence to be a foil to Godzilla, or he doesn't, his whole existence isn't centered around Godzilla. He doesn't care about Godzilla because he's dealing with his own internal battle and his own demons. So because that his character is dealing with his own stuff, and it's not just something that is written there to focus in on Godzilla, it becomes more humanistic and it becomes a lot more grounded. And I think that is a key difference. A lot of the way that the Godzilla films have done, centered around the monarch story and everything like this, it's just a lot of the characters are there specifically just dealing with the monsters, and it's like, well, you gotta have, that's what -1 did differently. It's like, no, this is a very, very human story based on true events that just happens to have Godzilla in the background. And I think that's probably why it works as well as it does.
Yeah. And Godzilla, like, I mean, yes, he still represents the atomic bomb and all that with his atomic breath and all. There's still that symbolism in the black rain and all that. But what's also there for Godzilla this time is he represents Shikishima's trauma coming back to haunt him. So he's rooted to the main character and the main character's struggle. But his struggle, Shikishima's struggle, is not about Godzilla per se. Godzilla is just a representation, a physical manifestation of that in the story.
He's the physical representation of his own personal demons.
Yeah. And in the American Godzilla films, Godzilla doesn't really I mean, he represents nature restoring balance, but what does that mean to our character? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, it's so empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I was really excited when they were going to do the 2014 one, because we got that teaser trailer and they had a quote from Oppenheimer in it, and like, all right, this is it. They're gonna do Godzilla justice, and then all that anti-nuclear theming was sucked right out of Godzilla for that first movie. And I was like, well, now the American audience is going to go and they're never going to get the message Honda intended.
And you know, Ben, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit. I want to be careful how I say this. I want to make sure I say this sensitively. But Godzilla has always been in its most powerful as a metaphor for the bombing of World War II. Whereas I'm not sure how the U.S. can replicate that sort of
that's the thing.
Trauma. Yeah, like they think it's about the monster.
Yeah.
But it's about...
Well, most of America grew up on the 70s films.
And the 80s films, yeah.
And and that's where they look to. And that's what they're trying to replicate.
I mean, and it's not like they haven't had some really intriguing directors and creatives taking on these films, right? I mean, I'm trying to remember particularly. Yeah, Gareth Edwards did the 2014, and Adam Wingard's doing the new one. So it's like, these are talented directors. It's just, you know, they're struggling because they don't have the same cultural touchstones, I guess. That's where you're struggling.
It's a very hard character to translate overseas. It just is.
It is. And so there is one thing though I want to talk a little bit about is that, I mean, as much as America has struggled with, interpreting Godzilla, I didn't go into -1 expecting -1 to deliver the most effective homage to Jaws I have ever seen on screen. And I was like, wow, it really is. Like, there's that whole sequence on the whole boat and the sea, you know what I mean, with the whole group and everything. Oh my gee, I was like, wow. Now he's just showing off because he's showing the Americans how you actually interpret an American film in Japan.
Yeah. Well, that's the sense I'm getting watching these. I mean, you can see all that they've pulled from the MonsterVerse. You can see a lot pulled from the MonsterVerse in the new Japanese Godzilla movies, both Shin Godzilla and this one.
Yeah.
But they do it right. They correct the flaws of the American ones as they go about doing these things. It's like, oh, okay.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, the one thing that -1 does that they did, which was smart, which was just to kind of take it all away from anything that's being associated with the American one, anyways, by setting it back. By setting it back at the war and closer to the original, you're just kind of avoiding all of the mess, and you're kind of just digging it out of it and saying, no, this is something different.
You know what? This is going to be the strange comparison from the outsider. Okay. This is the 60th anniversary, yes? 60 or 70? 70th anniversary. My apologies. It was interesting watching it because, again, like, Ben has been working hard over the years to educate me on my kaiju and Godzilla films. He's been working hard, but I could see, and I caught the the original announcement music and all this stuff. I caught all that stuff, and I caught some references.
Progress. We're getting progress.
Yeah, I know, we're getting it. But it's funny because in some ways it's a little funny to me because this seems like a celebration of 70 years of Godzilla.
It is.
And a month ago, we also got Wish, which was a celebration of all things Disney, and that has been absolutely destroyed. But it tried to do a similar thing. It tried to give you, hey, we did all these things over the last 100 years, and now we're going to do them on film. But it doesn't hit the same. And this feels new.
Yeah.
It still feels new. Godzilla -1 feels new, and it feels fresh, even though it's set in 1945. Even though that they're throwing in these things to hint at other films from all that time. And this is a film this is honestly, I think it might not be in my top 10 films of the year, but it might be because it's a great film.
It's easily in the top 10 for me for this year, easily. I mean, I don't know what to tell you about Wish. I mean, all of the advertising ahead of Wish was awful. The trailer,
I didn't know Wish was coming out.
The trailer looks terrible, but whereas this is the opposite. I mean, it embraces the concept of Godzilla by saying, you know what, we're going to ignore all of this stuff and we're going to go back to the roots. But I don't know why we're talking about Wish, to be honest.
I brought it up because it is meant to be a culmination, a celebration, a party for 100 years of Disney.
Yeah.
And with Godzilla -1, it is, you see what they're trying to do here, but it still feels fresh. It's a 70th birthday party for Godzilla, but it still feels like it matters. And I think that that's really impressive, and that's why I compare them. They're totally different films. I'm not saying they're similar in any way, other than the fact that they are anniversary parties. And,
I mean,
this is done beautifully.
I think another part of it is, and I could be wrong here, but this is just me speculating. We know how Disney likes to run the studio. I mean, how they've dealt with Marvel over the last 25 years should tell you exactly how they run. Everything is kind of regimented, and I mean, that can lead to some good films and it leads to continuity, but what it can also possibly do is stifle personal creativity. And the difference between that is, like, Toho read, was it Yamazaki's script and was just like, do it. You know what I mean? It wasn't, they didn't sit there and say, well, you need to do this to tie into this, and you need to do this to tie into you know what I mean? They just read the script, loved the script, and said, you know what, do it. And from the most part, I mean, Toho didn't really have much to do or much to say with the production, especially since it's such a, the funny thing,
it's so opposite to what Toho was traditionally been.
yeah, and they were very much so. And you look at the budget of this compared to, like, I mean, this is I think it's like 1/10 of the budget of even Wish, which is an animated film.
Yeah,
like
it's less than the 15 million figure being thrown around.
Yeah,
Yamazaki has said, I wish it was that much.
The 15 is including a lot of the
probably is, yeah,
a lot of the post work that was done, put into it with the translations, with a lot of other things like that. It's including a lot of other stuff that Yamazaki had nothing to do with.
Yeah,
but
he didn't have access to that to make the movie.
Exactly. I from what I heard, it's even less than 10 of what he had for
that wouldn't surprise me. Yeah,
and that's crazy. And you think about what he's been able. I mean, that if there's any film, and this is the weird. What I'm going to say is going to sound weird, but it's true. If there's any film out there right now that best represents what you can get done on a smaller budget, it's -1.
Yeah,
because I stack -1 up against any of these big. I mean, the effects work and the work done in -1 for me is just on par with something like Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. And Dead Reckoning cost $255 million to make. I think that's the number.
That would not surprise me.
I know it's well over 200 million that it cost to shoot that film, and it's like, but then again, they shot Dead Reckoning Part 1 and 2 back to back, so it could, you don't know how that plays out, but still, that's like, I mean, it's not even 5% of that budget that they use to make -1. You need talented people that are that are dedicated to wanting to do something, and that's how you get this film.
Well, let's talk about the film itself here, the characters within the film a little bit here, because Shikishima's journey, which we talked about a little bit before, I think is fascinating. It is absolutely riveting. But what we see, as we talked a little bit about, a man dealing with his trauma, with PTSD. He has been blamed for not fulfilling his mission as kamikaze pilot, and at the end of the film, of course, he has the opportunity to do that, and he does not.
Yep.
And I would love to hear from you both a little bit about your feelings about that decision and just his journey as a whole.
Well, if you want to go first, Ben, that's
okay. Yeah,
I got some things to say, but you might want to go first.
I wonder if we have the same things to say.
Fair enough.
maybe not. So basically, the decision of him not to go through with it at the end, I was a little mixed on, because I get it thematically. The whole theme is live. Don't throw your life away for war, basically. But at the same time, self-sacrifice to kill Godzilla has been a key element in the Japanese films. Like in the original film, and even the second one, Godzilla Raids Again, there's a major death at the end. Spoiler. Spoiler for a nearly 70-year-old movie.
Yeah.
There's a major death at the end that gives the rest of the characters an in to kill Godzilla, basically.
Yeah.
And so him not sacrificing himself to kill Godzilla at the end of this film was a bit of a flip in that way. But it works thematically, again, because the whole theme. Yeah, so I was okay with it. Whereas, normally I would have been like, oh, he should have gone, like, because that's just the way that the Godzilla tradition goes. But I was okay with it, and even at the end where the woman's still alive, it was the same thing. I was like, this feels like a Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
It reminded me of War of the Worlds, where the kid. I mean, it's been a very long time since I saw that movie.
Oh, the Tom Cruise one?
Yeah, yeah. But the kid, doesn't he run over a hill and there's this big explosion and you think he's dead and then he's just at home at the end of the movie?
Yeah.
And it's like you have your happy Hollywood. It reminded me of that, the way that she was alive in the hospital at the end. But again, because it was so tied to the theming of the movie, he'd gotten past his trauma and he was free to live again. I was okay with it. But it took 2 viewings for me to be okay with that ending.
Well, here's the thing, and this is not just a context of Godzilla films. There's a lot of it's something that happens a lot in Japanese cinema, I find these days, and maybe even more so in Korean cinema. But there's this big need for these big melodramatic moments to happen towards the end of a film. And I mean, my biggest example that I could just spout off the top of my head is the ending of Train to Busan, the Korean film. You know what I mean? You build after 2 hours of this whole ludicrous zombie stuff, and you have that scene at the end. And I'm not going to spoil another film on this podcast, but my point is that it's just the nature of the way that the cinema is right now in Japan and Korea and stuff like that. There's this big lean towards melodrama and these big moments. And I find with Japanese and Korean cinema is like there's a lot of times where those big moments aren't earned, but then when they are earned and the film has developed and earned those moments well enough, those are the ones that stick with you. And I think -1 earns its ending. Now, my take on the whole part with Shikishima and the ending is that I think it's not just that, he's shirking response, you can talk about that and, the grand sacrifice and everything, but the more important part of that whole thing for me is the fact that it's Tachibana who gives him permission to live. And I think that says more about him going through with the self-sacrifice than it would have if he did. Is the fact that here's the guy who blamed him for everything and blamed him for shirking his duty and hated him for so many years for not doing what he was supposed to do, giving him permission to live. That was a bigger, and as much as you're saying the statement of the self-sacrifice, yes, I understand 100% where you're coming from, especially in the Godzilla theory. I think the fact that he's given permission to live is an even bigger statement.
Yeah, no, it worked. That's what I meant by it worked thematically, and I was like, yeah.
And
it's not just there's Tachibana forgives him, but also his neighbor.
Yep.
She runs up when she finds out what he's gonna do, she's horrified but can't do anything about it. But when he survives, remember she runs up to him with the note and hits him.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's the other people in his life actually giving him permission to live that I think is a bigger message.
Yeah.
And then you have that one scene at the end where if you haven't gone through this whole journey with him, like if it hasn't been as impactful as it actually is, that the tacked on scene with her at the end and her saying that one line, is your war over yet? I mean, that doesn't hit unless everything else has worked. You know what I mean? But that one line, that hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
When she says that, because of how effective everything else was. When she says that, it's just because he's never at one point in time in the film up to that point said that to her directly for her to actually realize that that's what he needed to hear in that moment. Done. Just done. That just floored me. So
I adore what you're saying, Kirk. I really do, because that to me, honestly, he's given permission to heal.
Yep.
That hits different. I mean, this idea that, but because he's prepared to sacrifice himself, he is prepared. He's still taking a risk.
Yeah.
But that's what I loved about this, and this is, I think, shows real maturity for any film, not just not just a Godzilla film, because I don't want to speak too much, but I mean this idea, like a Marvel film, for example, usually ends by who can do the biggest punching, the most punching.
Mhm.
And in this particular film, yes, there's a bit of that, but he doesn't have to do it himself. He doesn't have to do it himself. The real journey, the war, is within himself, and because so much of the film is people pointing fingers at him.
Yeah.
It really is, and to hear that moment, to be told you're allowed, it's a moment of grace. It's a moment of forgiveness.
Yep.
It's almost like that is incredibly beautiful, and I've never said that about a film like this before. It's a beautiful moment.
It really is. There's
Um,
so much of his guilt that he's attached and wrapped up to just like as much as in Godzilla is a physical embodiment of his demons, Tachibana is the physical embodiment of his guilt.
yeah.
And for his own, like for Tachibana in that moment to say live, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, his guilt kind of saying it's time. It's so well done. And I really, I mean, before that plays out the way that it does, and you see the whole part where he's so insistent on finding Tachibana. I was like, okay, we're getting a little off track trying to track down the one character. You know what I mean? But when you see the way that it's played out, I understood.
Yeah.
But it's just if there was one part of the film where I was kind of like, okay, we're enough of this, you know what I mean? It was getting into that part, but then when it plays out, you're like, okay, now I understand why they invested that time.
Yeah.
I get it.
The movie's very tightly written like that.
Yeah, and
the fact that Tachibana comes back after all that time, he was set up in the first scene of the movie.
Yeah,
to come back for that. Yeah,
I mean, I love it when when a film and a screen, like a screenwriter and something can do something like that, where they can take you to a point where it's like, well, I don't understand why this is, and then 15 minutes later, you're like, ooh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you can do something like that, it's it goes back to the writing. And as good as the directing in this film is, I think his writing is even better.
And you know what? As I think, Ben, like it's funny. Like I admit too, when the woman was all right, I was like, okay, but I agree it earns it. I agree it earns it. And this idea of let's live and live together. Let's come together and just live forward. I think is so powerful and so current. Like I cannot speak for the Japanese emotional state after. I cannot. I refuse. I won't take that. But this feels like a film that couldn't have been done 70 years ago with that ending.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it could have been. I don't mean to speak for others, but it feels like this is a very significant ending to this film.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. Having the I don't even remember her name in the film, but having her survive that blast, you're kind of like, especially when you're dealing with the 40s, 50s. I think they're in the 50s by then. I can't be sure.
47. I think it's
47.
I think it was 45 to 47.
Yeah, so they're in 47. I mean, it's not like they were doing a lot surgically then. So I mean, hospitals were, what they are. But at the same time, I mean, it's weeks after that thing where she finally is able to find him, So I mean, that rang true, but at the same time, it's a little bit of a fanciful.
Yeah,
it's the fantasy ending. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the Wizard of Oz ending, and by then I don't hate it because I feel that as an audience we've earned the right to see him happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
we've gone through this journey with him through everything, and we've kind of lived with his despair for 2 hours. I mean, you want to see this guy, you want to see this character happy. So I mean,
Yeah.
if I wanted to sit back technically and really delve into it, yeah, there's all sorts of issues with it. But as a viewer who's gone through the previous 2 hours, I'm just like, no, I'm good. This is going to send me home on the right note. And
Well, there's
giving
a
her,
bit.
yeah, giving
There's a
her
bit
the
of
last
a.
line.
Oh yeah, yeah.
perfect.
There's a bit of a hint to how she survived. I don't know if either of you picked it up. On her neck at the end,
Yep,
the camera zooms. Did you notice that?
I did notice something.
There's a little
yes.
mark on her neck, and it's not explained what it is, but it is moving.
Yep.
And like speculation online anyway is generally that it has something to do with Godzilla. Either his cells or something somehow infected her, and
Fair
that would be
enough.
how she survived. You know, his healing ability.
Yeah, I mean, there is that.
But I mean, there's speculation because that's focused on at the end, and then it just cuts, and there's no explanation
Yeah.
of what that is.
They've left that wide open too, and
Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, another wild, if you want to get into wild speculation, there's also been other wild speculation that she might be somehow related to or descended from the guardians of Mothra, and that's kind of why she she survived too. I've heard that theory too.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, no,
we have no-
I don't want to get too much into that,
Not
but
to that, no.
you are right.
There's something shown there. Yeah,
that's their door to go back and to follow up. But to be honest, I'm happy with where it is.
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
happy with where it is.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you do to follow that up, but yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, that's why I suggested Mothra, not to follow up on her story, but to start fresh. The same idea in that it's a whole new take on a new character with, on another monster. Not necessarily directly connected, like the old movies where they weren't really connected.
There's the big three: the Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan. Those are the big three in the Godzilla universe. Yeah. We didn't even talk about this.
Yeah,
this was the #1 film for like a week in North American box office.
It's made more money here than in Japan.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went on a Sunday night, and there was well over 100 other people in the theater with me. And the thing that amazed me the most, because I watched 2 movies that night because I'm trying to play catch up. I haven't been able to see a lot, so I'm trying to catch up with a bunch of stuff that I haven't seen yet. I went to a second film that night where there was 15 people in the theater and none of them would shut up. I went to Godzilla and everybody was just quiet and invested. And it was like refreshing. Yeah.
Guys, I want to let this keep going, but we are out of time.
Yeah. It's been a good chunk, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's been incredible.
To wrap it up, you guys need to see Godzilla -1 and you need to see it in the theater.
Okay, well, wait a second here. Let me screen it or skip it. Jump it.
What?
I always do my screen it or skip it.
Go ahead.
All right. Godzilla -1, screen it or skip it.
With the biggest screen you possibly can.
Yeah, screen it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard it's been extended again, so go.
And there's even
Christmas break, go.
there is even I've heard plans to bring the black and white version to American theaters sometime late February, early March. Not confirmed yet, but and if they do it, it'll be more of a special event type thing. It won't be a traditional run like this one's getting right now. But I've heard case that they're talking about possibly bringing it in.
I hope they do, 'cause we got a long wait for a Blu-ray.
after it's completed its run in Japan, and they want to time it up more with the physical release. And apparently right now the physical release they're thinking about is going to be sometime around March.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still it's still all very preliminary, but I'm hearing March.
I hope they time it for March. I'm going to be in Japan.
March-ish. and that they might release the black and white version in theaters a couple of weeks before the digital and home version comes out, kind of tied in. At least this is all speculation, and it's all
Yeah.
just, but
Toho, the
early
thing-
stage planning, but that's what I've heard.
This is definitely a screen it for me. It goes without saying. I really do think this may be one of my favorite films this year, and that's saying a lot.
Mhm.
But I do got to pull the cord, guys.
No, we got time.
Is there anything you want to promote before we wrap up?
Godzilla, go see it.
Of yours.
Oh no.
My handle is Movie Junkie TO, so you can see that out on, I guess it's X now, and some other places, probably like Insta and stuff like that. But yeah, no, and I do still do some writing for In the Seats. So I mean, I actually think I have to do a Shaw Brothers film, a Shaw Brothers release right up after I'm done here. So there's a big Shaw Brothers retrospective launching on I think it's Mubi this weekend. So I have to write something up about that. But yeah, I mean, that's hard. Ooh, hard. It's not like I haven't seen half the films already. Yeah, getting into Shaw Brothers is a whole different, completely different conversation. But yes. So anyways, yes, definitely go see Godzilla -1. It's fantastic.
I appreciate that, guys. Honestly, there's a nuclear energy here between the two of you, and it's amazing to watch. For you at home, a reminder: you can find us wherever podcasts are available. We are taking a bit of a break over the holiday season, but there are interviews that have been dropping, and more episodes. We will be back in January with our top movie moments of 2023. So you can find us, and you can always like and subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you go to the podcast page on screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are some small group questions to help you get the conversation started where you are. But gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.